So I've made 2 videos on the manhwa castle already, and the manhwa follows a very straightforward story for most of its first season. The protagonist Kim Shin also wasn't anything that unique. He was very cool, as a character very dependable, excellent leadership, very caring towards his companions. He had all the traits that you would associate with a badass no-nonsense protagonist. But some of the new information and reveals in Season 2 have recontextualized just about everything, making Kim Shin a far more nuanced character who is, at best, morally questionable, and at worst, an utter manipulative psychopath. So let's take a closer look into the psyche of the man known as Amar Tigro. For those who are unfamiliar with Castle, it's centered around this character Kim Shin and his revenge for his late father, a cop who was looking into the shady connections and practices of this conglomerate called Hassan. But in doing so, he discovered something much more sinister: an omnipotent international crime syndicate, Castle. And Castle, realizing somebody was prying deep into their business, sent their best killer, Baek Do-chan, to mercilessly murder Kim Shin's father, and thus setting in motion his quest for revenge. Like I previously discussed, Season 1 of Castle followed a very linear revenge story. Kim Shin spent the majority of the manhwa gathering forces and making allies to take on Castle. He had the charisma and the trustworthiness that made people want to follow him. I'll be going into spoiler territory from this point on, so you've been warned. So in Season 1, Kim Shin went after Baek Do-chan, successfully dispatching him in a very close, very tough fight that served as the finale of the first season. And up until then, nothing about Kim Shin's character strayed too far from his initial presentation. And he was pretty reasonable in all the decisions that he made, even if revenge itself is inherently a bad thing. But everything changed after the battle with Baek. You see, Baek Do-chan was merely the muscle of Castle, and the man who physically did the deed of taking Kim Shin's father's life. The man who's actually at the mountaintop and is the catalyst for all of this evil is the president of Castle, Choi Min-wook. If Baek Do-chan was the physical threat and the mountain that Kim Shin had to scale as a killer, Min-wook is Kim Shin's true enemy in a spiritual, human way. So naturally, Choi was Kim Shin's immediate next target after defeating Baek Do-chan. And that's when things seriously took a left turn. In chapter 117, which was accompanied by a theme song aptly titled Eternal Damnation, Kim Shin came face to face with Choi, surprisingly requesting that him and his group Baek-e be taken under the wings of Castle, also offering to help Choi in his quest to unify more crime syndicates in the world and take Castle underground. Although this is very much a barefaced lie and a thinly veiled attempt to just destroy Castle from the inside out, albeit initially uninterested, after some convincing, Choi was amused enough to entertain this idea and let Kim Shin in. This whole exchange and the dynamic between Kim and Choi was symbolized by the Gates of Hell, a very famous sculpture by Rodin, which many believe is a metaphor for the futility of life. The inability to fulfill our deepest, uncontrollable passions, which sounds eerily fitting for Kim Shin's situation. To make things worse, the whole scene was capped off by this infamous quote, "Abandon all hope, Yu enters here," which was some pretty telling foreshadowing of Kim Shin's future and the man that he would eventually become, or rather he has always been, just unbeknownst to the reader. When Season 2 officially kicked off, the prologue gave us a lot to chew on. Kim Shin was seen kneeling in front of several gravestones, and the narrator seemed to be talking to someone, almost chastising him for not being able to stop the monster that is Kim Shin. The most interesting thing to note here was that the story very noticeably stopped framing Kim Shin as the underdog hero, almost the opposite. We caught some silhouettes of the Big Five antagonists who have been revealed as of the recording of this video, and the narrator implied that even them will eventually fail against Kim Shin. And right after that, we saw a bloody, disheveled but still very much full health Kim Shin square off against a mystery opponent that still remains unknown to this day. As far as Kim Shin's characterization goes, it's only on chapter 64 that we truly got to learn everything, but even before that, we were given bits and pieces and clues that we can piece together. So upon his victory over Baek Do-chan and his subsequent entry into Castle, Kim Shin unsurprisingly became a hot topic in the underworld, and most characters became intimidated by him. But the one person who always had the quote-unquote correct opinion on Kim Shin all along is one Ma Ha-gyao. Hagyeong is most likely to be the penultimate final fight for Kim Shin, and has been confirmed as one of the strongest characters in all of Castle. And this guy absolutely cannot stand Kim Shin. For most of Season 2, Kim Shin was hiding the extent of the injuries that he sustained against Baek Do-chan, using that to play mind games with everyone and make them think he's handicapped, until he actually isn't, until he is, but then not again, and so on. And Hagyeong finds this kind of mind games absolutely pathetic. Hagyeong inferred that Kim Shin is probably hiding things even from his own companions, which would be proven true later. But anyways, throughout Season 2, Kim Shin loses a lot of people, connecting back to the prologue scene. From people he worked with back in Russia, to his very best friend, Sojin-tae, who isn't confirmed dead yet but in a vegetative state. And it's maybe because of these losses, but the way Kim Shin moves as a leader in Season 2 is somewhat irrational to say the least. For example, after a grueling battle with the Triads, he made the decision to go after Choi Min-wook immediately, even though 99% of his men were already at their limits. And this is around when things truly hit the fan, because Kim Shin left some members for dead while showing a clear bias for Jin-tae, making sure that he in particular makes it to a hospital while the rest of the injured are left to deal with Ma Ha-kyung's forces. Now, Kim Shin never forced anyone to join Baek-i, and everybody knew the risk when they joined the cause, but the issue is that Kim Shin tried to hide his nature from his followers until he felt like he no longer needed to. This is also something that Hagyeong takes note of. Kim Shin was truly ready to kill Choi Min-wook right there and then, he was just unsuccessful. He revealed his true nature of caring about absolutely nothing else but his revenge in that moment, and in that moment only, because he thought it would be the end. Meaning that up to that point, Kim Shin was afraid of potentially losing manpower if every Baek-i member were to know in advance that Kim Shin would abandon them if needed be, and they were just means to an end for him. This is manipulative to say the least, but up until that point, we only got small hints that Kim Shin may not be the guy that we believed he is. The real bombshell was dropped on chapter 64. This chapter provides a flashback of a young Kim Shin reacting to his father's death. Subsequently, we also got to see how Kim Shin behaved when he was in his earliest stages of trying to topple Castle. Blinded by rage, Kim Shin almost tried to go after all of Castle as a mere adolescent and had to be stopped by Choi Min-wook's former hyung, Kang Min-song, who would later end up mentoring Kim Shin. Being the main opposition of Castle for the longest time, Kang Min-song was right there when Choi Min-wook turned to the dark side along with the formation of Castle, and has been trying to stop him ever since. He was also affiliated with Kim Shin's father before his death, this being the reason he was able to track down and help a young and enraged Kim Shin. At some point towards the end of their training, Min-song's final instruction for Kim Shin was to go to a place called Hwayam City, calling this the key to defeat Castle. But nobody from Hwayam City, even including the Deuteragonist P. Woo-jin, is anywhere nearly as strong as the top brass of Castle or Kim Shin himself. So why would Min-song advise Kim Shin to go there? See, this is the kicker. This was Min-song's attempt to sway Kim Shin away from his quest for revenge. He decided to send Kim Shin to Hwayam not because people from there are so strong that together they could feasibly defeat Castle. Min-song sent Kim Shin there in hopes that the kindness and the warmth of these people will rub off on him and make him realize that revenge is not worth it. This is also something that Kim Shin realized only after going to Hwayam. But Min-song made a grave mistake by telling Kim Shin to go there, and he realized it too. So at some point, after being a thorn in their side for so long, Min-song would be caught and compromised to a permanent end by Castle. In his final moments, he got to see Kim Shin one last time, and in that moment, he saw something in Kim Shin's eyes that made him take back everything he said. He came to realize that if Kim Shin were to go to Hwayam, rather than the good people over there influencing him, it was going to be the other way around. Kim Shin is beyond any kind of reason. He is going to influence them instead, and they're gonna become collateral damage. With his dying breath, Min-song will plead Kim Shin not to go to Hwayam City anymore. He practically begged him to move on, and in the present, Kim Shin has also come to understand why Min-song suddenly changed his mind. And yet, he pressed on with everything, knowingly. And this is the most important part. This is the reason I said Season 2 recontextualized everything. It's not easy to catch everything the manhwa is trying to tell you. Most fans thought that the whole Kim Shin becomes evil angle was going to play out in the form of Kim Shin breaking down mentally in response to the death of his companions. But at least as of right now, we know this to not be true at all. He is most likely saddened by it to an extent, and probably guilt-ridden, but his nature of viewing everything as a mere means to an end has been there since the very beginning. He long predicted all of these losses, he knew what he was doing, and put people at risk knowingly, and by definition alone, this kind of makes him a psychopath. So does all of this just mean Kim Shin is an irredeemable piece of shit? Well, not exactly. I know this is a lot of information, and it can get almost a bit contrived, but since this is author Jeongyeo, I'm willing to believe that nothing is done without a purpose. So despite everything that doesn't make Kim Shin look like the best person, certain characters still seem to be of the belief that he is severely guilt-ridden about all of his actions and tries to make up for them in his own way. And this self-contradicting behavior of Kim Shin may very well be an intentional narrative device, because some fans believe that the mystery opponent from the prologue is none other than Kim Shin himself, signaling an internal struggle of sorts. I don't like this theory at all, but it is a popular theory for what it's worth, so. But with all of this aside, even with Kim Shin's attempts to somewhat correct the error of his ways, to some characters it's just not enough anymore. They've lost faith in him. One such character is the Protagonist P. Woo-jin. Most recently, Becky took another massive loss with the death of Isil, probably the only true good person in all of Castle. Isil was someone who aided Kim Shin against Baek Do-chan in Season 1, and he withdrew from Becky when they joined Castle. He also runs an orphanage and a restaurant. He even became wheelchair-bound because of his services for Kim Shin, and him and his companions were killed for no reason other than to provoke Kim Shin. And this in particular has become a breaking point for many characters, even including the aforementioned P. Woo-jin. Woo-jin is also a popular candidate for the character in the prologue, and this is the theory that I like. And because if Kim Shin is truly going to crash out, P. Woo-jin rising to the occasion and stopping him sounds like a pretty good finale to me, because early Season 1 also featured a fight between the two, so it would create a good full circle moment, and it would also be a great parallel to Choi Min-wook and Kang Min-song. But as of right now, even if this is the finale, both P. Woo-jin and Kim Shin are flawed characters, so it's hard to predict how the good-bad dynamic will play out, but that's a topic for another day. So far, it's been the manga and pro wrestling historian Edward Takeshi. Let me know if you guys enjoyed my analysis, and if you liked the video, leave a thumbs up, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.